Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on Tracerco's online presentation for a few of our techniques on your tanks, piping, and flare systems. My name is Carly English, your technical advisor for the Process Diagnostics Division. In this presentation, you'll learn how Tracerco's different applications can help with reducing on downtime, plan and save money on upcoming turnarounds, optimize your process performance, and understanding the value with troubleshooting. Before we get started, I thought I'd share some of Tracerco's history. We are the inventors of gamma scanning technologies. And since this, over the many decades, we have grown from our location in the UK to over 400 employees with multiple locations around the entire world. Tracerco has provided companies with the insights they need to make informed decisions about their operations. Our expertise allows customers to operate more productively, effectively, and safely. Speaking of safety, I would like to emphasize on how safety is Tracerco's #1 priority. As we all know, earplugs are a requirement when working inside your plant. I wanted to share why this is so important. There are estimates that over 22 million workers are exposed to potentially damaging noise at their workplace each year. The exposure to such high decibels could kill the nerve endings in our inner ear. The more exposure will result in permanent hearing loss that cannot be corrected through surgery or even with medication. Noise that results in hearing loss does limit your ability to hear high-frequency sounds and understand speech, which seriously impairs your ability to communicate. You would not be able to hear the alarms in your plants or even understand your fellow engineers in case of an emergency. Hearing aids may help, but they do not restore your hearing back to normal. So, hearing loss is preventable. That's why it is so crucial to always have a set of earplugs on your person at all times. For our agenda, we will focus on the value of our gamma scanning applications using Tracerco's trademark neutron backscatter, PhaseFinder, and through vision technologies. We will cover topics such as level indication verification and density changes, discovering plugged areas in your piping, identifying debris and buildup from the material in your pipes, as well as determining the flow relationships through flare lines, piping systems, and to pinpoint emissions. We will mostly be focusing on the understanding of why these techniques are so important to you in your process. At the end of this presentation, there will be time for questions and an answer period, so if you would please save your questions until the end. Let's begin with Tracerco's PhaseFinder, also known as our neutron backscatter. This technology is used to scan on tanks and spheres, which gives you a clear and visual picture of hydrocarbon and other emulsion levels. The way this works, we have a small radioactive source, except it's a neutron emitting source, and you're able to see the wand here. So, both source and detector are on the same side. And to really understand what a neutron backscatter entails, imagine it like a floor Swiffer. It's a long wand with a flat head. And essentially what we're going to do is place it on the very top of your tank, slide it all the way down your vessel, and every time we find a density shift is when we will mark it, then repeat the same process until we get to the bottom of your tank. From this point, we can detect the hydrogenous material by the neutrons penetrating through the tank, which is about 6 inches. That material then bounces back or backscatters to the detector for a reading. This application is non-intrusive, or can it change the composition in your vessel? In this specific case, an engineer had stated that they were getting ready for a tank cleaning, and they were wondering how many vacuum trucks was needed, and it turned out after the test was performed, their level gauge was completely off. We were able to tell them how much sludge, oil, emulsion, water, and even solids that were present and how many trucks which was needed in order to clean out the tank properly. This allowed the customer to prepare for maintenance quickly, effectively, all because of our PhaseFinder technology. In the depiction below, the customer was unloading from a vessel with contents of different combinations, which required an outstanding amount of space and availability within the tank. There was a shipment of feedstock coming which required filling their tank multiple times. Due to the current level gauge reading 23% full and the second level gauge reading 52% full, there was an inconsistency in accurate readings. Tracerco was able to play a vital role to ensure the customer had the accuracy of the level as well as a peace of mind once the level gauges were able to re-collaborate. Equally important, if you understood how our PhaseFinder technology works on your storage tanks and spheres, we apply the same technology on pipes. I ask this question all the time to our customers, and well, I already know the answer to it, but do you ever get any plug pipes within your facilities? I'm sure you know the answer to that, and it is yes. Tracerco's capability we have is scanning pipes to determine if you have any plugging. Sometimes folks call us out stating they have 1,000 feet of pipe and they want to understand where they might have some plugs so they will know where to heat it up, cut it out, or whatever the case may be. You will then want a more detailed analysis to see what exactly that buildup looks like. So as this animation is running, it's showing you a couple of different techniques to help determine buildup inside your pipes. This one, instead of working on different density changes like we were discussing earlier, this is related with hydrogen content. As long as there's hydrogen content difference between material that's plugging and normal material in the pipe, it is able to scatter and pick it up. Now, if you want to quantify it, we can use a gamma scan just like a column. As long as we know the density of that buildup, we can tell you the exact depth, height, and width. More and more customers have been doing this to determine the exact deposits happening within their pipes. Very useful tool to find plugs and piping. Now, if you wish to see the height and how much deposits are occurring in your pipe, if you want to see a little bit more detail, we can also perform a through pipe scan. As you can see in the photo above, we have one of our engineers with a source on one side and a detector on the other. Attached to that is a yolk, which will then move all the way down your pipe as like a phase finder until that density shift. Our operations team marks that shift change and then rotates our device 90 degrees. We repeat the same process in the same area. By this, our application can give you an approximate height, width, and depth of the deposits in your pipe. We get called out for this because customers need to know while doing a chemical cleaning, a wash, or even if they must take their line out of service. There needs to be an understanding of how much debris has been built inside their pipe. Keep in mind, like I mentioned before, this scan gives you an approximate height and width of your solids. For this example, a customer really wanted to get a more detailed circumstance. So we were able to provide a service called our Through Vision Scan. Essentially, if you're unfamiliar with this technology, it's like your basic CAT scan or CT scan. We will then take your reading of your pipe, use a source and a detector until we get 9 specific data points. This will then give you 1,100 different data points that stipulates out and creates a very colorful topographical map as so like this. This then will tell you how dense your buildups are, the shape of that same buildup, and exactly where it's located. This is one of our most popular applications, especially used on flare lines. This is a very critical part of your process, but it is often and sometimes overlooked. Luckily for you, we have the technology to determine those density changes that are so important and to be aware of. This next technology is primarily a simple process. We use this flow rate measurement to verify instrumentation. We constantly get called out because there are some folks that have instruments that are highly questionable. So our customers ask us to verify if there are any miscollaboration. So what accurate method does Tracerco use for measuring those flow rates? It's a simple test. We'll inject a small radioisotope upstream where your instrumentation allows a flow down to our detector. This then will pass our second detector, and from that point, it's a simple calculation. Flow rate equals distance over time. The most common use of this technique is to calibrate a flow meter. And one example would be one customer buying hydrogen from a neighboring plant saw his monthly bill increase by $60,000. The supplier had installed a new ultrasonic flow meter, and they attributed the change to a greater accuracy. The buyer's mass balance calculations did not really support that, so he asked Tracerco to measure the flow. We found the flow to be only about 1.4% different from what the buyer had initially expected. Faced with this verification, the supplier reviewed the new meter setup and discovered that they were using a higher pressure than what the line was operating under to convert to standard cubic feet or density. Using this shows the volume and the value of material. This was caused by several mishaps that led to changes in a scheduled startup and a shutdown period. Lastly, one of our more popular technologies is isolating fugitive flare emissions, which is also known as Tracerco flare studies. Now, if you understood the process of our calculations of distance over time equaling flow rate, this is the same concept except a bit more advanced with more detectors. Once again, we will take a small radioisotope on the high side of the pipe, allowing it to then pass our detectors, which will be at each one of your units. At this stage, we will then determine an increase of velocity, i.e. an extra amount of gas flowing through your lines. In this specific study, an engineer provided information on where he believed there was excess gas that was entering the flare system. He was unsure on which unit or equipment level of where it could be. As we configured more and more data, there was an increase of velocity from the second to the third unit. This then indicated an exceeded amount of emissions coming into that specific area. From that point forward, we understood that it was coming out of Unit 2, which we then isolated again to find out which section of the mishap was happening. Completing the same setup inside Unit 2, it was then finalized that the PSV was leaking. We were then able to help the engineer as to measure the flow velocities and isolate where the fugitive flare flow was coming from. With all things considered, the leak was found on the pass relief valve, and in essence, this is a very powerful tool, and a ton of our customers are doing this test more and more each year because of the known restrictions on flare emissions. Having those routine pipe and flare system scans allows you to stop worrying about the what-ifs and lets you identify the buildups of deposits before the unexpected. This brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. I truly hope this showed you how our different techniques allows for reducing on downtime, plan and save money on upcoming turnarounds, optimize your process performance, and understanding the value with troubleshooting. I greatly appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to be present for this webinar. Again, my name is Carly English, your technical advisor for the Central Region, and I can be reached at the email address and number below. Now, if you have any questions, I would love to answer in our chat. I look forward to meeting you all very soon and one day in person. Thank you.